Monday, April 20th. You're watching the SIG podcast. Trust the process. Habs fans, how we feeling? Game 1 in the books. Juraj Slafkovský hat trick. We're going to break it all down. We're going to talk about the big number 20 and focus in on him a little more. We're also going to talk about another young sensation over in Philadelphia. How about that? Porter Martone is cooking the NHL early in his career. The NHL GM search is on the way. One team already has their guy, but 3 more are still looking for theirs. We have 2 great mailbag questions in the queue and so much more to get to. It's going to be a great show. Stay tuned. It all starts right here, right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast. Trust the process. The sickest NHL prospect podcast with Snake and Shayne.
With the 5th overall selection in the 2024 NHL Draft, the Montreal Canadiens are proud to select Ivan Demidov.
It's gonna be sick.
Okay, producer Shayne here in studio with my good partner, Simon the Snake Boisvert. Snake, how are we feeling today?
Doing great, Shayne. Doing great.
Excellent, excellent. Well, listen, we've been blessed with some great playoff hockey. Not much more we can ask for, really. And we're going to break down one of those games last night. The series that many people were most excited for, Montreal Canadiens and the Tampa Bay Lightning, the 5th and 6th best teams in the NHL, respectively, facing off in Tampa for games 1 and 2. Game 1 goes to Montreal. 4-3, the final score. Juraj Slafkovský, the man of the game, hat trick, overtime winner, power play, all that good stuff. But Snake, we over here at Trust the Process, we get down to the nitty gritty, right? We dissect these things and we analyze. And we're going to do that right now with Juraj Slafkovský. The topic that I'd like to tackle with you pertains to the term big game player. We hear that often, right? These players that kind of elevate their games, or their games are kind of molded for playoff hockey or Olympic hockey, right? Tournament style hockey. When the moment matters most, these players rise to the occasion. Juraj Slafkovský is one of these players. First and foremost, in his game specifically, what have you picked up on that allows him to be a big game player?
You know, in an 82 game regular season, you're often going to have players who are not going to give 100% every game, and that's normal. Most players don't give 100% every game. And that's why some players, they take advantage of it to boost their stats during the season. And then you wonder during the playoffs why their stats don't match what they usually do during the regular season. And there are other guys, Sam Bennett, for instance,
Great
he's an okay player during the regular season.
Yeah.
And he was even called disappointment at some point because he was drafted 4th overall. But look at what he's done in the playoffs for the Florida Panthers. And he got a big contract out of it.
There you go.
So I think what happens is that why do you have big game players and some others are not or not as much? It's a little bit of a mystery in the sense that it's very hard to predict at a very young age. You can see you can see red flags, but you don't necessarily see those qualities because in junior hockey, a guy doesn't have to give or be at 100%. To succeed. Now, the difference during the NHL playoffs is that the play gets very, very tough.
Yeah.
So you have to have stamina. Stamina, I don't think it has to do anything with size, but it does help.
For sure.
Obviously.
For sure.
It gets tough. Size helps. And it's how much you want to win. It's how much you're hungry for the playoffs. Because I remember seeing a survey that was done by the NFL many, many years ago. And they asked players, do you care if your team doesn't make the playoffs?
Wow.
And there were a very high percentage of players who said, I don't care. I'd rather be on vacation. It's tough on my body. I've earned my money. Who cares?
My God.
Yeah. So that's the NFL. It's not the NHL. But just to let you know that it could explain why some guys want it more or hungrier for it. And but really, there's no like simple explanation. However, you get to see who these big time players are as their career unfolds.
Yeah.
So now you can tell that the way Slav is playing, there's a good chance that in 5 years he's still going to be like this.
That's it.
I don't think he's a one hit playoff wonder. If you see my point.
And furthermore, even better. Like he's only 22.
Yeah,
right? So
exactly. Obviously, you need
exciting part.
you need skills. I mean, we're talking about Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett is still a skilled player.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yep.
He's not a fifth liner. So you do need skills, but skills is not enough when you get to the playoffs.
It's will, it's determination, it's
exactly
competitiveness, right? That kind of elevates a player. Obviously, like you say, you need a foundation of skills, a foundation of physical attributes as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the desire to want to win those puck battles, to want to get the puck in the net, right? That's what puts the player over the edge. Now, we like to take not a scouting approach to everything, but maybe a bit of a drafting approach to our topics, right? So I'm really curious to dive into this big game player regarding the draft, right? Because Slafkovsky was a blatant example of a big game player. That's how he got his name on the map.
Olympics.
In the Olympics, 7 goals in 7 games, wins the MVP, helps Slovakia get a bronze medal. We know the story, right? He elevated his game at such a level on the biggest stage in the world that, you know what? Teams took notice and the Montreal Canadiens took him first overall.
Although the competition was not the same as this year.
But here's
where
it was
still the Olympics.
Here's where my question comes in, because the debate was a 3-way debate, right? There was the guy that was the consensus for many years. There was the new guy that's just come on the scene. It's like, wow, okay, big player, big game attributes. This is interesting. Or there's the highly skilled Logan Cooley that was also in the discussion. So when faced with these decisions, and not necessarily for first overall, right, but later in the first round or in the second, wherever, when you have a choice between a high talent player or a player that has big game attributes, how do you balance that decision?
Well, it's hard because, like I said, the big game attributes, the guy has to have opportunities to show it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take the junior hockey example, well, a lot of players who won't necessarily be big time players in the NHL still can win the MVP award in their junior league when their team wins the championship. Whereas with Slafkovsky, the level where he performed world championships and Olympics, albeit, like I said, the Olympics were not what they were this year, but still
against
Olympics.
Grown men.
I think you could have a glance of it because it's harder.
Mm-hmm.
So when you scout younger players, I think what you have to do to try and guess if they're going to be big time players is how much they care on the ice.
Yeah.
How much they float, which is a red flag.
Mm-hmm.
I'm always very, very concerned when I see guys who float on the ice and just wait for the puck to go on a breakaway, or just like pace themselves a little bit too much. You have to pace yourself, obviously. You can't go full throttle for 60 minutes, or let's say 20 minutes that you're on the ice. But I think it's more like a process of elimination.
Yeah.
So I think it's easier, I would say, to identify those who won't be big game players than those who will be.
That's fair. Mm-hmm.
So it's very rare. I have to say, last year, Brady Martin was picked 5th overall. I think Brady Martin was identified as a future big game player.
That's it.
And that's why he went 5th overall. Because if you look at Brady Martin's statistics, even this year, in his draftless 1 year, it's not great. No. I mean, for a guy who was drafted 5th overall.
But that's it. Compare with like the guys that went after Higgins, Martone, right? Like these are more talented players.
Yeah.
But the example of Sam Bennett that you brought up, right?
Yeah.
That's what the Nashville Predators had in mind with Brady Martin. They're like, okay, well, we don't care about regular season statistics.
Mhm.
We want a guy that's going to help us win the cup.
Because Higgins went number 7, Martone went number 6, and these guys were supposed to be 1 and 2, 3-4 months into the season.
Yeah.
And then they started dropping. We're going to talk about Martone a little later in the show. But the reasons why they dropped vis-a-vis a guy like Brady Martin was exactly it. Now, we all know the NHL is a copycat league. Maybe they saw Bennett and they saw Martin, so they're trying to project. It's just that these guys are harder to project.
Yeah.
And that's why sometimes you see these big-time players who are drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round because it's too hard to predict.
Mm-hmm.
It's so in the 1st round, you usually go for the highly skilled players, the guys who produce a lot. And look at the debate this year with Gavin McKenna.
Yeah.
Stenberg, could be they could go number 1, 2, or 2, 3, or 1, 3, whatever. Ivar Stenberg is seen as a big time player because of what we saw at the World Junior Championship.
Gold medal. Yeah.
McKenna is seen as more a soft, skilled guy.
Okay.
But McKenna might still go number 1.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to not take a guy who could score 100 points. And remember, we don't know what McKenna is going to do in the NHL playoffs. We really don't know. We have no clue right now.
That's it.
So at least you know that McKenna, like a hockey person said many years ago, there are guys who take you to the playoffs and there are guys who make you win in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And I think Gavin McKenna, for now, I think he is seen as someone who's going to make you win, who's going to take you to the playoffs. Then we'll see. But am I going to say that McKenna is not a big game guy? No, I just don't know.
That's it. It's so hard to predict, and that's why we're having this discussion, because it is difficult, Snake. And you mentioned it briefly there. You can get these guys in the later rounds, right? We've seen these players, and the greatest example, Habs fans will appreciate this. Josh Anderson was picked in the 4th round, and we know Josh Anderson in the playoffs goes to another level. We saw it last night again, scored a big goal, made some big body checks. That was not a penalty, by the way, but we're not going to get into the officiating. Like, obviously, if scouts had a crystal ball and they'd seen what Josh Anderson would become in the NHL playoffs, he would have been a 1st-round pick, right? Yeah. So,
although he's not like a highly skilled guy,
no, exactly,
but he would probably have been.
Every team needs a player like
that. A 3rd-tier 1st-round pick.
Yeah, exactly.
Between 21 and 30. Yeah.
So then these late-round gems, if you will.
I think the Josh Andersons are probably the hardest players to find at the draft, and I'll tell you why. Because between rounds 3 and 7, obviously you're going to be throwing darts.
Yeah.
And it depends on when you want to throw darts at. So some teams like the Habs recently, they went for lots of goalies. Some other teams will go for pure skill. Carolina Hurricanes, for an instance, in the last few years. But when it comes to detecting the Josh Andersons, it's very, very hard because, yes, there are guys who are going to throw their body around in junior hockey, but they're not at maturity.
No.
Physically and mentally.
It's hard to predict.
And also, the opposition is not physically mature either. So you don't know if a guy is very, very tough in junior hockey, is he going to be as tough in the NHL when basically every player is his size or almost?
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to find. So a guy like Josh Anderson, I think what you have to do you have to acquire them at some point.
Of course. Yeah.
You have to wait until, teams will draft 50 of them. 2 of them will become Josh Andersons. And at some point, not too late in their career, not when they're 33, but when they're like maybe 23, 24, 25, for some reason, a team wants to get rid of them. Then you have to jump on it the way Benjamin did with Anderson. That's one example. Not every player is going to be a Tom Wilson or a Porter Martone or a Slafkovsky, where you can tell that, okay, they're first round material, and we pretty much know how they're going to be in the NHL. So because a lot of times, if you're talking about Anderson, he's not as skilled as these other guys.
Of course. Yeah.
So what if he doesn't have what it takes to make the NHL? Because you also need skills. Okay, very often we talk about fourth line players and say, he's not skilled. Well, actually, they are skilled. If you see my point.
Most of them were dominant in their junior years. No, that's it. So it's a really interesting concept. It's impossible to put our finger on it, but we try our best here at Trust the Process. If anybody wants to chime in the comment section, we encourage you to do so. As always, how to identify these players, when to draft them, all that good stuff. But point is, the Habs have some and then some. So you know what? They're well off in the playoffs. Snake, a little more on that game last night before we move on. There's two players I'd like to get your thoughts on. They both played defense, and they were on the same pairing yesterday.
Yeah.
It's Arber Xhekaj and Jayden Struble.
Yeah.
Who a lot of people were either concerned or doubtful of how they would respond in the playoffs, right? It's high intensity. The moment matters. Any little mistake can end up costing you the game. And these are players that, have made quite a few mistakes in the regular season, right? So rightfully so, I think people were saying, well, maybe Reinbacher draws in, maybe Engstrom draws in, right? What do we do with these guys? Personally, I really enjoyed their game, especially Arber Xhekaj. I thought he was a major factor in this game. What did you think of their performance and the series moving forward?
Well, I think their performance was very good. I think Xhekaj proved that he belonged yesterday. However, can it last for 7 games or 6 or 7 games?
There's
That's
the question.
The thing. But yesterday, we're just looking at yesterday, he was very, very useful. You need size in the playoffs. And, Xhekaj is kind of a unicorn when it comes to this. But will it last 6 or 7 games? We'll see in the next few days.
That's it. The playoffs, right? I think a lot of people are noticing now there's no space, right? There is no space to maneuver in the playoffs. The opposition will swarm. They're going to be all over you. And that's something that the Habs need to do as well. They need to swarm. They need to be all over their opponents. I thought Arber and Struble did a great job at that yesterday. So, credit to them. They've risen to the occasion. They've silenced the doubters. Hopefully they could continue to do that throughout the series. But I thought it was worth mentioning these two players. Anything else to add on that game before?
Remember, it was what I want to add is that it was a 1-1 game at 5-on-5. So it shows your point that there was absolutely no space.
None
to maneuver.
No whatsoever.
And there weren't that many shots on goal.
No shot totals.
No. Most of the action came during the power plays, but there were lots of them.
Yeah.
Also, some people like it, some people don't. There is a certain aspect to the power plays that is fun because there's a better chance of scoring, and especially the Habs power play is very fun to watch. But at the same time, hockey is a 5-on-5 game.
And that's what everybody wants. Nobody asked to see the officials get involved in the game. You know what I mean? They're there to police it. They're there to keep players in check. They're not there to go about their own agenda. You know what I mean? Or manage the game. No one pays to see the refs. So look, we're not going to get into that discussion because we could be here for hours. But we're going to transition to another team now. We know Mondays are for the Habs, and I think we've spent a good amount of time on them. But the playoffs, there's always some great stories that come out of the playoffs. And right now, one of the great stories in the NHL comes from the Philadelphia Flyers. Porter Martone, since joining the Flyers, has 10 points in 9 regular season games, and he scored a huge goal in game 1. Ended up giving the Flyers the win. What have you seen from this player that, he felt like he was drafted 6th overall? I mean, obviously, high talent. But at 19 years old, to already come into that team and play the way he has, it's like that's significant right here.
Yeah, not many guys do it. I mean, I remember Kel McCarr a few years ago, but usually these guys, even Ivan Demidov last year at 19, I mean, he was okay, but he didn't, he didn't crush anyone during the playoffs.
No.
With Martone, he's an interesting case because he was the favorite to go number 1 or number 2 in the draft.
Mhm.
But as the season went on, and I was part of that group who thought that, is he just dominant because he's big and he's a late birthday?
Yeah, October.
And he seemed to float around sometimes, which is something I didn't like. And that's why I ranked him number 9th overall, which I think right now looks pretty bad. Because we'll see. Yeah. I mean, it's just like 10
small
games.
Sample size.
It's a small sample size,
impressive.
but it doesn't look good. And even the fact that he was drafted 6th overall probably will look not so good at some point. So maybe the early evaluations of this guy a year and a half ago were better than the year-end evaluations.
Yeah.
Because remember, every player that is a favorite to be in the top 10 or top 15 at the beginning of the year, scouts are going to start dissecting his game.
Of course.
They're going to start nitpicking. And it's almost as if you're trying to talk yourself out of taking the player or liking the player even. And I do that very often. I did it with Gavin McKenna this year. I love McKenna until maybe I saw him in the Memorial Cup where I had reservations about his game. But this year, it's almost as if I went into the season want him to nitpick the guy.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it works. Sometimes there are guys who fall in the draft, and there was a reason for them falling in the draft. And some guys you're thinking, okay, maybe we were overthinking the whole thing. Maybe in Martone's case, I and some scouts were overthinking the whole thing, and he should have gone in the top 3. Yeah. But we shall see. I mean, obviously, Matthew Schaefer is always going to be like the man. But then Michael Misa is younger. He's 18. Martone's 19. Look, we'll know in a few years. But now it's looking like Martone is looking like he's the number 2 guy from that draft.
It's
James Hagan started in Boston, also a late birthday. I think he was okay, but he didn't have the impact Martone had.
Look, Michael Misa has had a fine season.
Yeah, and he was 18.
In San Jose.
He was 18.
A fine season. Nothing groundbreaking like what Matthew Schaefer did, of course. But further on Martone now, he was one of those big Canadian players that decided to migrate to the USA for one season. He played with Michigan State.
Yeah.
How much do you think that helped him prepare for the NHL rather than staying in the OHL this season?
Well, in terms of number of games played, it's obviously less in the NCAA. So obviously the junior calendar is more conducive to, being ready for NHL action in that sense. However, NCAA players are older.
That's it.
So most of them won't make the NHL, but if you're playing against a 23-year-old, night in, night out, and you're 19 years old, you got your work cut out for you. And I think what happens is, and look, I love junior hockey. I work in junior hockey, but I also do understand that when a guy has played 3 seasons in junior hockey like Martone had, because he was a late birthday, that at age 19, if you're not going to go to the American Hockey League, which perhaps he would have gone to the American Hockey League had the rule been in place last year, I think you got to do something, because otherwise you're just like, you're not moving forward.
No, exactly.
Quite often I see 19-year-old players who are playing their 4th junior season, and you're thinking, okay, even the stats go down sometimes, and you're thinking, okay, why
What can you learn? What can you gain?
What is he learning? He's just reproducing what he's done for the last 3 years. Doesn't necessarily improve on this or that. How good is his team? Sometimes they get traded to a contender. It's kind of and they go to the World Juniors. It's kind of an unstable season. The 19-year-old season for junior players who are stars. And look at guys like Shayne Wright, what they did with him, and So perfect. I do think it was the right move for Martone. It's too bad for junior hockey. Like I say, as a guy who works in junior hockey, I don't encourage players to do it, but I do understand. But I do understand. As an analyst, I do understand why they do it.
In his case, it made sense. Look, it's Monday, so I got to link it back to the Habs, okay? And credit to our great Agnello Cavallaro who brought this up before we started recording, okay? Yeah. A lot of people see Parter Martone doing this and are like, well, why couldn't Michael Hage do this? Michael Hage is older, right? He also played in the NCAA.
Yeah.
Statistically, he was actually better than Martone. Yeah. He was better than Martone at the World Juniors. Why did he go back? Why not go in the NHL? Snake, please help the people understand the difference between these players.
Well, I'm going to throw a few pieces of information here or opinion, and then we'll take it from there. First and foremost, not the same type of player.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael Hage's game is based on his hands, his skating, his skills. Parter Martone's game is built on toughness. He's also a skilled player, but it's built on toughness. He is more mature physically.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. Second of all, let's not forget, okay? I know the rank of selection doesn't matter once you're taken because, Lane Hudson being picked 62 today, who cares really?
Yeah.
But Martone was always considered a top prospect.
Exactly.
Michael Hage went 21st overall. He was considered a good prospect. So I'm not saying that Hage hasn't gained traction since then. I'm not saying he hasn't played great this year, but I'm just saying that there was a gap between Martone and Hage at the beginning, and I think that gap is still there. Will Hage catch up one point? Could he make more points than Martone one day? Yeah, maybe. But it's not the same type of player. They don't fit the same role.
There you have it.
Hage is a highly skilled player, but not a tough player.
So I think that kind of settles that debate. You can still debate in the chat section. We encourage you to do so. But, I don't think it's fair to compare the two right now, even though there are reasons to compare.
Yeah.
Very different players. Yeah. Michael Hage will come to the Montreal Canadiens, and when he does, I'm fairly certain that he will have success. Snake, before we move along, I want to tell everybody who could be wondering about our beautiful couches here and saying, well, where can I get these? Let me tell you a little bit about Mobilier Menora, who are gracious enough to bring us these beautiful seats. Our butts are so comfortable. We do this in just a great environment, and it's all thanks to them. Mobilier Menora, they've been there since 1977. They've been producing high-quality sofas, beds, and chairs, all made right here in La Belle Province. Solid, comfortable, and well-designed, perfect for relaxing after a long day or for watching the game in total comfort. Their models come in premium fabrics and finishes built to last and stay beautiful for years. You can find Mobilier Menora at furniture retailers across Quebec and Canada. Mobilier Menora, quality without compromise. Of course, a shout out to our partners at the Sick Podcast who bring you this show. Truly, it would not be possible without them. First and foremost, our good friend Nick at Cheapest T-Shirts. He is the man. And if you're looking for the cheapest prices on wholesale apparel in Canada, you will find them at cheapesttshirts.ca. They are proudly Canadian and trusted by thousands of customers from coast to coast. They deliver unbeatable value every day. You'll always get the cheapest prices, plus same-day shipping and even next-day delivery, so your order arrives fast. CheapestT-shirts.ca is the go-to source for teams, businesses, events, apparel printing companies, and resellers. And it's also perfect for the individual shopper who just wants the best deals on everyday apparel. Plus, you can enjoy free shipping on larger orders and a simple, easy-to-use website that makes online ordering a breeze. Get the cheapest deals in Canada today at cheapesttshirts.ca. Last but not least, a big shout out to our friends at Betway, where you can get a deposit matchup bonus up to $300 on your first deposit. You can scan the QR code on the screen or click on the link in the details section to create an account and redeem your welcome offer. Now, the offer is only available for new customers. Terms and conditions apply. The offer is not available in Ontario, and you must be 18 years or older. Please play responsibly. With that, it's time to go digging in the mailbag. Our first question today comes from Jay Gagne. The question here's a question for Simon. If we believe that unproven goaltenders have a lower value than unproven skaters of the same caliber, wouldn't it make more sense to not draft many of them and rather acquire them for a lower value pick? For example, Conte Miller, who was drafted in the 4th round, let's say he'd be worth a 5th or a 6th round draft pick on the trade market today. Barring, of course, player development, just from a draft pick value, wouldn't it make sense for another team to draft a skater in round 4, 2 years in a row, and trade a 5th or a 6th round pick to the Habs for Miller? Meaning that when it's all said and done, Montreal would end up with 2 6th round picks and the other team with a 4th and Miller. This is really interesting.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, because I have to say to Mr. Gagné that this is how I felt for so many years. That scouting goaltenders is like voodoo.
Trade for them.
Just trade for them. Just the way we were talking earlier in the show, trade for the tough guys when you know what they've become and teams are willing to trade them. So I do understand his point of view. However, I think at some point, you have players on your list, you know, defensemen and forwards. And at some point, you have no more darts to throw.
Yeah.
Because you're like 99% sure that the guy you have on your list won't make the NHL. Because NHL teams usually will have maybe 75 players on their list. They don't have 200 players on their list. They might have 75 players, maybe 100. And what happens is at that time, when you go down the list, and sometimes I do the exercise myself when I watch the draft, and I'm thinking, okay, who would I draft in the 4th round or 5th round or 6th round if I were the Habs or the Avalanche or whoever? And I'm scratching my head, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know. It's all guys who I think won't make the NHL. Of course, some of them will. You know, there are 6th round picks that make the NHL that no one has seen coming. But I'm talking like on draft day.
Yeah.
So on draft day, I'm thinking, hey, why wouldn't I go for Conte Miller? Okay, or any other guy, Alexis Cournoyer, another guy that the Habs took. Because I'm thinking, what if he's the next Henrik Lundqvist? Because if you look at the top goalies in the NHL in the last, 10, 15 years, I think the percentage of these guys being lower draft picks is higher than the percentage of star forwards who were lower draft picks.
There you go.
But again, the philosophy of saying, okay, let's not draft any goalies and wait for them to emerge in the NCAA and then say, hey, Habs, do you want to trade Alexis Cournoyer? Do you want to trade this guy? Yeah, look, it's one way of doing it.
Mhm.
I remember there was an Arizona Coyote scout who told me many years ago, maybe, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. He said, we had our scouts meeting, pre-draft scouts meeting, and our general manager said to us, you guys do whatever you want, but this year, no goalies.
Yeah.
Okay,
Wow.
so that's
Wow.
a philosophy.
Yeah.
But right now, I'm more on the side of drafting tons of goalies. Maybe I'll change my mind in 5 years. But for now, and that's why I like the Habs strategy in the last couple of years with all these goalies that they're collecting.
It's really interesting to dissect this because, you take a look back at previous Stanley Cup champions, early 2000s, pretty much every team that was winning the cup had drafted their goalie that won them
Yes.
the cup.
Yes.
Marc-André Fleury, Jonathan Quick, Corey Crawford,
Yeah.
right? Jordan Binnington, Matt Murray in Pittsburgh,
Mhm.
Vasilevsky back to back. And then in recent years, it's been traded goalies.
Yeah, Darcy Kemper in
Darcy
Colorado.
Kemper, Aiden Hill,
Aiden Hill in
Sergei
Vegas.
Bobrovsky,
Yeah.
right? So it's okay. Now there's actually a debate to be had on both sides.
But it's kind of interesting what
yeah.
you're saying because Aiden Hill was not perceived as a good goalie.
No. in San
Kemper
Jose,
was
no.
an okay goalie.
Yeah.
And Bobrovsky had been a star.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all kinds.
There's no
No,
correlation. There's
no.
there's absolutely no conclusion to be had here. But that's why it's interesting to reflect on that, and the whole strategy. I think every team has a different strategy, and some works better for others. I think at the end of the day, it's the quality of the scouts that matter more than the strategy. But then again, that can also be debated. We have another question to get to before we end the show, so let's do that. Question number 2 today comes from Pierre Dufault. How dire is the Leafs situation? Oh, Pierre. When compared to other cap era teams, which other teams have been in such a bad state? Chicago when they moved on from Kane and Taves? I can't find a parallel. With no incentive to tank for 2 years, yet very little to build on after their 2 star players. Oh boy.
Yeah. I think it's, and we're probably going to talk about the Maple Leafs a little bit more on Thursday because they're supposed to have their general manager this week.
There you go.
Yeah.
They're narrowing down the search, apparently.
Yeah, and we'll talk about this at length because you know what I think of this search, you know, hiring a firm basically to interview Tom Fitzgerald or guys, who have worked elsewhere. Anyway, that's for another day. But regarding that question, I think the Blackhawks is a good example, but the difference I think between the Blackhawks and the Leafs right now, well, there are two differences. First of all, the Blackhawks, they still had their picks. Toronto doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
However, Kane and Taves were pretty much done in Chicago at the time.
Yeah.
Taves was sick.
Yeah,
and good for him. He came back, but obviously he's not the player he used to be. And Patrick Kane was still a good player, but he was not a star anymore. And they didn't have much to trade.
Mm-hmm.
They traded Duncan Keith, I think, for a second-round
to
pick.
the Oilers.
Brent Seabrook was injured. He retired. He was on LTIR. Whereas Toronto right now, they still have guys they can trade. I think Morgan Riley is gone this summer. How much is he worth? I don't know, but he's gone. Yeah. Austin Matthews obviously could be a fantastic rental player at some point for a team, but will he lift is no move clause.
Yeah.
Same with William Nylander, who signed for a long time. He could be trade bait, but again, will he lift his no move clause? John Tavares, I doubt he will want to go elsewhere unless he does want to be on the last place team. So yeah, they're in disarray. I do agree because of the draft picks that they don't have this year. By the way, the Leafs have the 5th pick overall before the lottery. So pre-lottery, they keep their pick. If one team or two bypasses them in the lottery, they have to give their pick to Boston if it's the 6th or the 7th pick. So Look, I think Pittsburgh will be in that situation very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Once Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are gone.
But I think Kyle Dubas has prepared.
He's kind of
for that
prepared
a
it
lot better.
because
Yeah.
he still has better young players than
Mhm.
Toronto. Where basically Toronto, they have Easton Cowan, who's okay. They have Matthew Nyes, who's very good.
Who they might trade for some
yeah,
reason. I don't know.
I think with Toronto, there's not much strategy you can have, contrary maybe to San Jose with Mike Greer at the time, Chicago with Kyle Davidson, because you're kind of stuck. There are 2 first-round picks you won't have,
Yeah.
and there's a bunch of stars who have no movement clauses. And what are they worth? If Austin Matthews says, well, you know what? I only want to go play in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then what do? What are you going to get in return? You're not going to get a fair return.
No.
So, look, it's their fault. They traded away lots of picks. They traded away some prospects who were okay or even good. Fraser Minton was good. And look, I think honestly, as much as I thought 10 years ago, exactly 10 years ago in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
that Toronto was going to win 1 cup at least in the next decade, now I think they're not going to win a cup in the next decade. So
It's hard to see it. Yeah.
it's hard to see it because it takes a long time. Remember, I know there are teams who do quick turnarounds, but the long rebuilds, the real rebuilds
Mhm.
are long, and it often takes 6 to 7 years from the start of the rebuild to win a Stanley Cup.
That's it. And Snake, I think this brings us, this ties a perfect, beautiful bow on our show because we started it by talking about big game players.
Mhm.
And that's something that the Leafs have not had since 1967. Anyways,
We'll see Mitch Marner in Vegas this year. He was always accused of not being a playoff guy.
they won game
Well,
one.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah. So we'll see how he does this year.
Exactly. Snake, you mentioned briefly the general manager search.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Devils hired Sonny Meta.
Yeah.
So they're that position is filled, but we're still waiting on the Predators. We're still waiting on the Canucks, and obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs. So hopefully we have some answers by Thursday. If not, we'll talk about it whenever the time comes. But quickly before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the hiring of Sonny Meta. Because you know what? Like, he's the Stanley Cups, right? He's from Jersey, local boy. A lot of people, especially Devils fans, are happy and are praising this hire. What do you think about it?
It's very hard to judge an assistant GM
Mhm.
because, when you're not working with him in the office, you don't see his list, you don't see the type of work that he does. It's almost impossible to know. Only people from the inside have a clue if he's going to be good or not, or has the potential to be good or not. Now, there's 2 things from the outside that I've noticed from this hire. I like his profile.
Yeah.
It's unusual. The former poker player, the data guy. He's you wouldn't have thought like 15, 20 years ago that a guy with, a degree in mathematics or something would be hired in the NHL. And this is where the NHL is going. So look, it's kind of fun to see what seems to be like an out of the box hire. However,
Absolutely.
where it's not out of the box is that Meta was the assistant general manager of a Stanley Cup winning team. And it's such a cliche. You see it in football. All the assistant coaches
Yeah.
who won the Super Bowl become
The
head coaches afterwards.
Seahawks. Yeah.
Yeah, the Seahawks, they were depleted from their assistant coaches just because the team won the Super Bowl. So I think in that sense, there is an out of the box aspect to the hiring, but there's also a very cliched, he won the cup as an assistant GM. He's going to be a good GM. We don't know.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see what he does because he has, contrary to Toronto, he has something to work with in New Jersey.
Does he ever? But you mentioned his interesting background. To give context to our viewers, Sonny Meta is a data scientist, a former professional poker player, a writer, an options trader, and a musician, and is now the general manager of the New Jersey Devils. That is an interesting life. Good for him. Hopefully you know what? It goes well in New Jersey. They've got a talented team, a great fan base, and hopefully he trades Nico Hischier to the Montreal Canadiens. With that, the NHL draft lottery date has been announced. It is May 5th, so it's coming up really, really fast. We'll have our answer for the Leafs. We'll have our answer as to who gets the first overall pick. Will it be the Vancouver Canucks who have the best odds? The best odds did not land last year for the San Jose Sharks, who could have had Matthew Schaefer. Could you imagine that? No, it was the New York Islanders who shot up the draft lottery. We will know on May 5th. And as you know, we're going to break it down right here at the Sick Podcast. Trust the process. Snake, I think we've tackled everything that we needed to tackle. Did I miss anything? Anything else you want to add before we get out of here?
Let's have fun on Thursday and talk about the junior hockey playoffs. Now it's getting interesting. Final four matchups in the 3 junior leagues. Now it gets interesting.
There we go.
And for Montreal people in the Montreal area, Boisvert Armada is playing Moncton. That should be a dandy.
Wow.
I'll try and catch a game or two.
What a series. Oh boy. Yeah, those are 2 wagons. So with that being said, that's going to do it for us today. But as Snake just mentioned, we're back on Thursday and we're going to have so much to cover, from NHL playoffs to junior playoffs to hopefully some GM hires. We're going to break it down right here on the Sick Podcast. Trust the process. Enjoy the game tomorrow. Montreal, Tampa, game 2. Tune in to the pregame show at Habs tonight. Myself, Drew Deeks, and Nick Lemire, maybe Brandon Legacy from Nashville. Who knows? Pierre McGuire's always on with us. It's a great time before the game to get you settled in. And then obviously Tony Marinaro's got you covered on the post game. He's going to be live from Tampa again tomorrow. Tune in to that. That'll be it for us today. For Simon the Snake Boisvert, thank you to producer Jimmy back at Master Control. I'm producer Shayne. This has been another edition of the Sick Podcast. Trust the process. See you Thursday. Take care.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast, Trust the Process on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.